I have no quizzes, no tests, but I did learn that the bus is leaving at 10 o'clock tonight from the quad. I'd like to thank AMSA for inviting me to spend a little time talking with you about what is really a passion in my life, which has been medicine. As you just heard, I'm an internal medicine specialist. I'm a general internist as well as having a subspecialty in infectious diseases. And I've actually been invited here because I am chair of the American College of Physicians, the Board of Regents. This is an interesting organization. It's a national organization that represents about a little over 133,000 internal medicine doctors. And we see our mission at the ACP as being the preeminent educational organization for doctors in both training as well as in practice. But we also have a second mission, which is to further and continue to lobby for access of our citizens to health care. And so because of that, our organization was supportive of the Affordable Care Act, which I'm sure you've heard a bit about over this last day or so, because it moves us closer, although not perfectly, to our goal of having all Americans have access to health care. It's been many years ago that I first decided to become a physician. I think it really occurred when I was 9 years old, and I got a bad burn on my leg and spent many hours and lots of time in my doctor's office. And I think it was at that time that I got influenced and realized that I really wanted to become a doctor. It was the doctors, his compassion and sort of expertise that was really exemplary. However, you know, a woman interested in medicine, you can go back now 35 or 40 years, was not very usual. I came from a family where my dad finished 8th grade. My mother left her high school at 11th grade when her dad passed away, and she helped take over the business where he was working. And so when I kept saying I wanted to be a doctor, being the first person to ever go to college in my family, there was a lot of anxiety. And so I was being pressured a lot by my parents, other members of my family, actually my teachers, to go ahead and do something that would be more acceptable at that time as a woman. And so what did I do? I went to a state teachers college. And it was at that state teachers college that there was actually a woman professor who actually became sort of a counselor for me. And one day I was telling her about how I had wanted to be a doctor, but now here I am in college, and if I went ahead and try to be a doctor, oh my gosh, I would be at least 30 years old before I would be done. And she looked at me and said, "You're going to be 30 years old anyway. Why not be a doctor?" All right? So the point to sort of remember, I think, is whether you want to be a doctor or a nurse or a dentist or a pharmacist or any healthcare provider, all right? Don't get discouraged, even if you have to take a circuitous route to get where you want to be. I was also, by the way, discouraged by professors, particularly, science professors. I particularly remember an incident where I, at a summer, enrolled in a physics class at UCLA. I was not a UCLA student, but I enrolled in a physics class because I needed it for the pre-med course. Some of you might appreciate that you constantly seem to be catching up on pre-med requirements. And what happened is when I came in, it was the very first time there was this amphitheater at UCLA, and the very first time the professor stood up there, probably as I'm standing up here now, and he pointed at me, and he pointed at one other girl that was in the room and said, "You two need to be lab partners because women can't learn physics, and if you're a partner with a guy, you're going to probably cheat off of him in order to do well." Well, I can't use the words that I used then about how I felt, but I will tell you that she and I took this as a real challenge. And not only did we do, and the other thing that he said, by the way, was, if you're looking to get an A, which I was because I wanted to get into medical school, I only give out 2 A's, and they always go to the boys or men in the class because they really can use it, all right, to advance their careers. All right? So We took it as a challenge. We actually did very well in the lab, and even better, we got the 2 highest grades in the class. All right? Yes. All right? And at the end of the time, he came around and he looked and he said, gosh, this is the very first time I have to give out 4 A's, all right? Because I had to use up 2 for those girls, right? All right? And 2 for the guys. But what is the point? The point is don't be intimidated by others telling you that you can't do it, all right? You can do it if you put your mind to it. So as you know, and you look around this room, women in medicine are not unusual as they were 40 years ago. About 50% of medical students now are women. And you know, when I applied to medical school, there was a question asked of me that nobody would dare ask today. They asked me if I was planning on getting married and was I going to have children. Because if the answer to that was yes, you would not get into medical school. Because the assumption was that if you were getting married and having children, then you would not then stay in the profession of medicine. And so therefore you were taking the seat of a guy who would stay in the profession of medicine. But today that's all changed. We in medicine and other healthcare professions are truly interested in getting as diverse a group of people to practice as we can. That relates to gender, ethnicity, race, academic interests, and all other sorts of interests. We need the most diverse group of healthcare providers that we can find to help, if you will, deliver medical care to our diverse population. So becoming a physician for me was the best decision of my life. I've had a wonderful career, by the way. I've had an opportunity to be a researcher, a teacher, an administrator. I'm lucky to provide some leadership for a large national organization. I've been a chair of medicine, and I've been involved in the development of a new medical school, which we've just mentioned. So as an aside, I have to give you a plug for this new allopathic medical school. It's the first one, all right, allopathic medical school west of the Rockies in over 40 years, all right? And it's the first new UC, all right, medical school that is in probably around the same amount of time. So we just got accredited this past week. We are, by the end of the month, we will be accepting applications for our first class. We are opening in 2013, so we'll expect whoever would like to come, I will see you in August of 2013 at the UC Riverside campus. Our mission is pretty specific. We want to address the shortage of the workforce and the physicians in our region, and we want to improve the health of our communities. And in order to do that, we're also making graduate education programs. Come to our medical school, come to our graduate medical education, do your residency there, and come practice with us. So we invite you to consider the UCR School of Medicine, all right, when you're applying to medical school. So now my plug is over, all right? I would like to tell you that this is probably one of the most extraordinary times to enter into a career for the health professions. I personally believe that the best is yet to come. The Supreme Court has upheld the Affordable Care Act, which means that millions of our citizens will have access to health care, and we will have the ability to treat and provide care as we've never done before. Imagine what it would be like for a doctor in around the 1890s who gets called to the bedside of a child, let's say, with diphtheria. How much could he do for the patient? Well, if well-trained, he'd recognize the disease and the signs and symptoms, and he'd make a diagnosis. But then what? Well, knowing the contagiousness of diphtheria, he would probably tell the mother about washing her hands. He would suggest that none of the other children come into the house or into that room where the child was. And he would also probably show her how to put compresses on the child's head if the fever got too high. And if there was a lot of restlessness with the child, he might provide a sedative. But for influencing the progress of the disease, he had nothing. He was virtually helpless. He had no antitoxin or antiserum to combat the toxin. He had no antibiotics to stop the growth of the diphtheria bacteria. And what he really knew is that all he could really do was wait and hope. However, okay, he would be, if the fates were kind, the child would survive. And if they were unkind, unfortunately, the course of the disease would proceed relentlessly and the child would die. But before this vigil was over, he would have made many, many house calls. He would have been to the family many times. He would have talked to them about everything else. And despite his failure in saving this child's life, all right, he would have a family that was eternally grateful for his effort. And despite all of that, if that family was beset by some other adversity, whether it had anything to do with illness or other things in the family, they would turn to him for help. All right? And so he would do this for each member of his community, of the families that he served. And what would happen is he would become one of the most beloved figures in the community. That science has changed all that, there is no question. We are now at a time where we as providers rarely go to the house to provide, but the patients come to us, and that the science and technology are such that we have to work at being sure we keep a personal interaction with our patients. But even though that is so, this is really the most, I think, exciting time in medicine. Imagine what's going to happen in the next few years with the application of stem cells in order for us to be able to do cell-based therapies. Think about as researchers discover more and more what's going on with genes and how they play in disease, how we are going to be able to pinpoint in an individual's genetic code where there may be a problem and specifically look, all right, to treat the basis of the disease instead of just the symptoms of the disease. Drugs are going to be revolutionized. They are not going to be discovered and produced by trial and error, but they are going to be specifically developed as researchers understand how individuals respond differently because of their genetic makeup or because of how we can use protein function, right, to actually further the treatment. Right? And the development of nanomedicine and nanotechnology, little machines that probably are smaller and are smaller than the period of an end of a sentence, will now be able to be used by you within a decade to be able to turn on and turn off certain either activities or actually go and treat certain specific things. You'll be able to go ahead, we will find tiny proteins that are going to will probably ward off any strain of influenza. It's going to be sort of like bye-bye bird flu or bye-bye swine flu. There are going to be precision-guided cancer killer cells that are going to go right in there and go ahead and kill the cancer cell and never even graze next to the normal cell that's nearby. Bye-bye chemotherapy side effects. And the explosion of technology is going to continue, whether it's from robotics, all right, where somebody can sit someplace in London and take out a gallbladder in New York, or it has to do with manipulation of the smallest blood vessels. All right, most surgeries that required weeks in the hospital, all right, are now done as an outpatient, all due to technology. But I must tell you, technology has some amusing side effects. So let me tell you this story. You know, the Japanese have done it again. This time they've weighted microelectronics with the most mundane of household objects, the commode. You know, Mr. Fujita of Nippon Telegraph and Telegram says, the toilet is the last machine now to be modernized, all right? Our device, he says, will save patients trips to the doctor. And this is what it is, all right? There's a high-tech device that offers one-stop health checkup. In the morning, after a quick trip to the bathroom, all right, and the person goes ahead as usual and flushes. Instead of the urine going down the drain, it goes around this commode where microelectronics go ahead and measure sugar and protein and ketones and red cells and white cells. And even in this device, you can stick your finger, all right, in a gadget over by the thing, and there you can get your pulse and your blood pressure and also your body temperature. And all of these are recorded on a screen. And if there are any abnormalities, they're sent automatically by modem, all right, to the physician. So when the information is in the can, so to speak, all right, they are able to go ahead and decide whether you need to come in to see somebody or not. You know, the Japanese have a wonderful way of using a word, and their word for this device is intelligent toilet, first thing in the morning, all right? So there's not only going to be that kind of technology, but the use of information technology is going to be extraordinary. I want to remind you and tell you that at UC Davis, they're the leader in telemedicine, but we will be using telemedicine to reach all of the corners, all right, of our country. There will be no individuals who won't have access, all right, to the best sort of medical care. And with physicians and others are going to be leading a patient-centered team approach to the delivery of medical care. And the future of you as healthcare providers is going to be extraordinary. You're going to be able to integrate all of this wonderful science and technology and really have the time and the ability to be able to interact closely, all right, and intimately with patients. Collaborations with patients and family, I will tell you, will be required to a degree never before appreciated. So as you consider and focus your energies on getting into medical school or other health professional schools, know that this country has a dire need for doctors, nurses, other healthcare professionals, all right? We need people in all aspects of the healthcare system. And this commitment of yours is going to require hard work and energy, and it's also going to require for you to be agile in an ever-changing both educational environment and professional environment. So, this reminds me, let me just give you one little story, a final story before I'm done. An Englishman and a Frenchman and an American, they came together, they have dinner, all right, on a regular sort of basis. And what they've done is that it was not unusual for them to have some philosophical discussions. And this time the question was raised, what would you do if there was this huge flood like in Noah's time, all right? And so what happened is the Englishman said, well, he would climb on the top of Big Ben, and as the water rose all the way up, what he would do is he would sing, God Save the Queen, and he would probably drown and die. And the Frenchman turned around and said, well, I would climb to the top of the Eiffel Tower, and what I would do is that as the water rose all the way up there, and I would probably yell, Vive la France, and I would probably drown and die. And the American, he looked and said, well, I'd probably climb to the top of the Washington Monument, and as the water rose up there and everything else, okay, what I would probably do is learn to live underwater, okay? So be adaptable, be like the American, all right? Learn to live underwater, all right? Take what comes in stride. This is an exciting time in your life. You can be part of a changing medical profession and a healthcare system that has never been seen before, all right? You can become part of a team that will wind up improving the health of our population and be on the forefront of medical care. So I look at you and say, you ultimately control where you will end up, what you become, and how successful you will be. No matter what your current circumstances are, always maintain a strong belief, all right, in your abilities to succeed, and you will accomplish anything that you want to do. Thank you.